Cowboy saved Apache from drowning and the map she had made his world collapse. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the wide open plains. Daniel Moore, a cowboy who had spent most of his life living alone on the outskirts of town, stood at the edge of a river, his worn boots sinking into the soft earth. His ranch, though small, was his sanctuary. He had built it with his own hands, brick by brick, with sweat and patience. But the world around him was changing, and Daniel, a man of few words, preferred to keep it that way. That was until the day he saw her. She was a figure he could hardly believe was real, a young Apache woman, struggling against the powerful current. The river was swollen from the recent rains, churning with raw energy. She had been caught in it, helpless, and Daniel's instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the water, his heart racing as he dove into the freezing stream. Every step he took felt like a battle against the current, but he couldn't let her drown. He reached her just in time, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the safety of the riverbank. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and though she tried to speak, the words were lost in the wind. Gently, Daniel helped her onto solid ground, his hands shaking as he wrapped her in his jacket to shield her from the cold. She was shivering, her breath coming in shallow gasps, but she was alive. "You're safe now," Daniel muttered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. She didn't respond at first, only staring at him with eyes that seemed to carry a world of secrets. She was unlike any woman he had ever known, wild, untamed, and yet, in that moment, utterly vulnerable. As he knelt beside her, he noticed something small and strange hanging from a leather cord around her neck, a pendant that caught the light just so, as if it were something far more valuable than its simple appearance suggested. She looked up at him then, and for a brief second, their gazes locked. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. There was something about her, something that spoke to him on a level he couldn't understand. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft and almost foreign. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the rushing water. "I don't know how I can repay you." But Daniel, still in shock from the encounter, simply shook his head, his rough hands still holding the warmth of her body. He wasn't used to such gratitude. In fact, he didn't know what to say at all. He had saved her, but he had no idea who she was or why she had been caught in that river. She had to have been running from something, or someone. And as he helped her to her feet, he noticed that she was carrying something hidden deep inside her pouch. A small, tightly wrapped bundle that felt heavier than it should be. Before he could ask, she pulled away, nodding silently. She didn't speak again, her expression unreadable as she turned to disappear into the woods. Daniel watched her go, his mind racing with questions, but all he could do was stare after her. What had she been running from? And why had she been carrying that bundle? Little did Daniel know, this moment would change his life forever. That small act of kindness, saving an Apache woman from drowning, would set into motion a chain of events that would unravel everything he thought he knew about the world and force him to confront a past he had long buried. Days passed since the encounter at the river, and Daniel Moore found himself restless, unable to shake the image of the Apache woman from his mind. His days had returned to their monotonous rhythm, tending to the cattle, fixing the fences, and keeping the ranch running. But in the quiet moments, when the wind howled through the plains or the fire crackled in the hearth, his thoughts always drifted back to her. The image of her dark eyes, filled with both fear and gratitude, haunted him. He had never expected to be thrust into something so unpredictable. It was a calm morning when the first sign of trouble arrived. Daniel was working on the fence near the far side of the property when he saw a group of riders approaching, their figures framed by the golden rays of the sun. At first, he thought it was just another group of travelers passing by. But as they drew nearer, the distinct markings on their clothing made his heart race. They were Apache warriors, and at their forefront was the same woman he had saved. She was riding a horse with the grace of someone who had spent their life in the saddle, her eyes scanning the horizon as her gaze found Daniel. The riders stopped at the edge of his land, their horses pawing at the earth, and she dismounted, walking toward him with a purposeful stride. Her face was no longer the same as the terrified woman he had helped days ago. Now it held an air of authority and strength. "Daniel Moore," she said, her voice firm but respectful. "I am Nayeli, daughter of Chief Takakota of the Redstone Apache." The name hit him like a bolt of lightning. He knew the Redstone tribe was one of the most powerful and respected in the region, but never had he imagined that he would come face to face with their chief's daughter. "I come with a request," she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "The debt you owe for saving my life has been paid, but there is more you need to know." Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what she was talking about, but there was something in her tone that told him this was more than just a simple thank you. She reached into her pouch and pulled out the very pendant that had caught his attention the day he saved her. It shimmered in the sunlight, and for the first time, Daniel noticed the intricate markings on it. "This," Nayeli said, holding it up for him to see, "is a key to something much larger than you realize. It is not just a trinket. It is a map, one that leads to a place hidden from the world. A place of great importance to my people." Daniel felt a wave of confusion wash over him. He had been helping a woman, not expecting to be entangled in something far beyond his understanding. "I don't understand," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Why come to me? What do I have to do with this?" Nayeli's gaze softened, and for a moment, her tough exterior cracked. "Because, Daniel Moore," she said quietly, "this map was meant for you. Your actions that day, your kindness, they were not random. You have a part to play in this, whether you are ready or not." As she spoke, the air seemed to grow heavier, and Daniel could feel the weight of her words. His life, which had been simple and straightforward, was about to change forever. Nayeli stepped closer, placing the pendant in his hand. "This is the beginning of a journey, one that will take you to places you never imagined. But be warned, there are those who will stop at nothing to find it first. And they will not hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Daniel stared at the pendant in his hand, the weight of it almost too much to bear. He had never been a man to seek adventure, but something about this felt unavoidable. The world he had known was collapsing, and in its place, a new, dangerous path was opening up before him. Without fully understanding why, Daniel nodded, his fate now bound to this woman and the mysterious map she had entrusted him with. Nayeli smiled slightly, her eyes filled with both determination and something else, trust. "We will start tomorrow," she said, turning to leave. "There is much to prepare." As she mounted her horse and the Apache warriors followed her, Daniel stood there, holding the pendant, knowing his life would never be the same again. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Daniel Moore saddled his horse and made his way to the edge of his ranch. His heart raced, and the weight of the pendant in his pocket felt heavier than before. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew his life had irrevocably changed. The quiet existence he had spent years building now seemed like a distant memory. As he approached the clearing where Nayeli had left him the day before, the sound of horses' hooves echoed through the air, and he saw her again. She was already mounted on her horse, waiting for him, her face set with the kind of determination he had seen in the eyes of warriors. Behind her, the Apache warriors stood, their presence commanding and silent. The entire scene was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Daniel's nerves tightened, but he pushed through. Nayeli gave him a small nod as he approached, her eyes scanning him with a quiet appraisal. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice calm, yet there was an unmistakable edge to it. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied, forcing the uncertainty from his voice. He had no choice now but to follow this path, whatever it led to. The journey they embarked on was unlike anything Daniel had experienced. The landscape stretched endlessly before them, the rugged terrain of the west offering little comfort to the weary traveler. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Daniel had always preferred the quiet, but there was something about Nayeli's presence that made him feel like every moment was filled with meaning. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure where he belonged. The days passed in a blur. They traveled through forests, across rivers, and over mountains. Each new place they reached seemed more remote than the last, as if the world itself was growing more ancient the farther they went. Daniel had little understanding of where they were headed, but Nayeli always seemed to know, guiding them with an assurance that made him trust her completely, even without knowing why. One night, after they had set up camp near a small creek, Nayeli finally spoke of the map and the pendant. "This pendant," she began, "was given to me by my mother. It holds the key to the future of my people. For years it has been passed down through generations, and now it has found its way to you." Daniel listened intently, his curiosity piqued. "I don't understand," he said, shaking his head. "Why me? Why did my actions that day matter so much?" Nayeli gazed into the fire for a long moment before speaking again. "Because your fate is tied to mine now. The path we walk together will determine the future of both our people. You may not believe it, but you were chosen. That is why I trust you." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Daniel felt a sense of purpose stir inside him. It was as if the weight of his past life had fallen away, replaced by a greater responsibility. As the night grew darker, the fire flickering low, Daniel sat by the edge of the creek, his thoughts racing. The map, the pendant, and Nayeli, they were all connected in ways he could not yet comprehend. But one thing was clear, he could not turn back now. The next morning, they set out early, the horizon just beginning to show signs of the day's first light. Daniel's mind was still buzzing with the weight of Nayeli's words, but he knew they were just beginning their journey. He didn't know where it would lead, but one thing was certain, he was no longer just a cowboy. He was a part of something much bigger, something that would shape his destiny in ways he could not yet imagine. The days turned into weeks as Daniel and Nayeli continued their journey across the vast, untamed land. With each passing day, the world around them seemed to grow wilder, more remote. They had crossed dense forests, navigated steep mountain paths, and followed winding rivers that cut through the land like veins. Each place they passed seemed untouched by time, as if the land itself held secrets, ancient and unspoken. Daniel had grown used to the silence that often hung between them. Nayeli, though a woman of few words, had an air about her that commanded respect. Her presence was as quiet as the wind, yet it held the power of something far greater. One evening, after a long day of travel, they set up camp near a rocky cliff that overlooked a wide valley. The sky was streaked with the fading colors of sunset, and the air carried a crisp chill as night began to settle in. Daniel sat by the fire, his thoughts drifting as the flames flickered in front of him. He still hadn't fully grasped the enormity of the journey they were on, but the weight of it was starting to settle on his shoulders. "What is it we're looking for?" he asked, his voice breaking the stillness of the night. Nayeli had been standing near the edge of the cliff, her gaze lost in the horizon. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "A place," she replied softly. "A place where our people will find peace. A place where the past will no longer haunt us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Daniel didn't fully understand, but he nodded, sensing that there was more to this than just a map or a pendant. There was something much deeper at play, something that stretched far beyond the two of them. Nayeli walked toward the fire and sat down across from him. "You know," she said after a moment, "my people have been running for generations. Running from those who wish to take our land, our culture, and our very way of life." Daniel listened intently, his gaze steady on her. He had always heard stories of the struggles between settlers and native tribes, but hearing it from her, hearing the pain and the resilience in her voice, made it feel real in a way he had never experienced. "I was just a child when it all began," Nayeli continued. I remember my father telling me stories of the land we once called home. But those stories became harder to hear as the years went on. The land was taken, piece by piece, and we were forced to move. She paused, her eyes distant. This map, she said, reaching into her pouch and pulling out the small, warm piece of parchment, is the key to finding what we lost. It's not just a map. It's a promise. A promise that we will one day return. Daniel could feel the weight of her words settle around him like the night air. He had never thought of his own life in terms of promises or legacies, but now, sitting across from this woman, he understood that what she spoke of was something much greater than land. It was a future that could change everything for her people. What happens when we find this place? Daniel asked, his voice low with curiosity. Nayeli's gaze softened, and she looked at him with a quiet intensity. When we find it, she said, we will rebuild. We will honor the land, and we will protect it. We will never be forced to run again. The fire crackled as they sat in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Daniel had always believed that a man's life was his own, that his choices were his alone to make. But this journey, this map, and the promise Nayeli spoke of, were starting to show him that sometimes, a person's life was connected to something much bigger than themselves. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about making sure that something worthwhile survived after them. As the night deepened, Daniel stared into the flames, the crackling fire matching the turmoil in his mind. He had come into this journey as an outsider, a man of few words and fewer ties. But now, with each step, he felt himself becoming something more, a part of something that transcended his past life on the ranch. The promise Nayeli spoke of was no longer just her burden to carry. It had become his as well. The journey had taken them far, and as the days passed, the bond between Daniel and Nayeli grew stronger. They had crossed through harsh terrain, traveled through vast stretches of desert, and navigated thick forests. With each passing day, Daniel found himself more deeply immersed in the mission they had set out on, a mission that felt bigger than both of them. Yet, with all the miles they had covered, they had yet to find any clue as to where the place Nayeli spoke of could be. It was during one such restless night, as they sat around the fire, that Nayeli spoke again. "The land we are looking for," she began, her voice calm yet filled with an underlying urgency, "is not just a physical place. It's a part of who we are. It is where our ancestors once lived, where our people were strong. But it's also where we must rebuild. And rebuild not just our homes, but our spirit." Daniel nodded, not fully understanding the weight of her words, but feeling the truth behind them. There was something in her eyes, something in her voice that made him believe in what she said, even though he couldn't see the end of their journey. "But how will we find it?" Daniel asked, his voice low, his gaze locked on the fire. "We've come so far, but there's still no sign." Nayeli shifted her position, her eyes scanning the dark horizon. "The map," she said quietly, "will guide us, but it requires more than just reading the lines. It requires understanding." Daniel furrowed his brow, still unsure of what she meant. "Understanding what?" Nayeli didn't answer right away, and for a moment, Daniel thought she wouldn't. But then she spoke, her words slow and deliberate. "The map is not just a tool," she said. "It's a symbol. A reminder of what we have lost, and what we can regain. It shows us the way, but it also asks us to remember why we are searching. The land isn't just about survival, it's about honoring the past, the sacrifices made, and the promise that we will never forget." Daniel looked down at the pendant that still hung from his neck, the small leather pouch now a constant weight against his chest. He had carried it for weeks, never fully understanding its significance. But Nayeli's words made him realize that the journey they were on wasn't just about finding a place. It was about reclaiming something far more valuable. It was about restoring a connection to something lost long ago. The next morning, they set out once again, and this time, there was a new sense of purpose in the air. It wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about what they would do when they got there. They were not just searching for a physical place, they were searching for a piece of their history, a piece of themselves. As they made their way through rugged hills and dry riverbeds, Daniel couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The land seemed endless, stretching out in every direction, but there was something else there too. Something ancient. Something that pulled at him. They had crossed paths with others along the way, some settlers, some traders, but always they kept their distance. Daniel had never felt like an outsider in his own land, but now, with Nayeli by his side, he felt a sense of unity with her and her people. The days passed in silence, punctuated only by the sound of their horses' hooves and the occasional rustle of the wind. But on the 5th day, as they reached the edge of a great plateau, Daniel saw something that made his heart race. In the distance, through the haze of the afternoon sun, he could make out the outline of a mountain range. And below it, nestled in a valley, was a small cluster of structures, buildings, possibly homes. Nayeli stopped her horse and looked out over the scene. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a certain stillness about her that told Daniel everything he needed to know. This was it. They had found it. The place they had been searching for. As they rode closer, Daniel could feel the weight of the journey lift from his shoulders, replaced by a new sense of awe. The land they had been searching for had been hidden in plain sight all along, waiting for them to find it. And as they approached the valley, Daniel knew that their journey was only just beginning. As Daniel and Nayeli approached the valley, the landscape before them seemed to change, as if the very earth had shifted to welcome them. The valley was nestled between two towering mountain ranges, their jagged peaks reaching high into the sky, a stark contrast to the flat plains they had crossed. Below, the valley floor was covered with wild grasses, and a small river wound its way through, its waters sparkling under the midday sun. The air felt different here, cleaner, fresher, as if the land itself had been waiting for them. The buildings Daniel had seen from afar were more than just homes. They were symbols of a lost world, a place where a community once thrived, now reclaimed by time. Nayeli pulled her horse to a stop, her eyes scanning the valley. "This is it," she said softly, almost to herself. "This is where our people once lived." Daniel looked around, taking in the sight of the ancient structures, some half buried in the earth, others still standing tall, though weathered by time. It was as if they had stumbled upon a forgotten piece of history, a place untouched by the hands of those who had come before them. The silence of the valley felt heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "What now?" Daniel asked, his voice low, filled with awe. Nayeli dismounted and walked toward one of the larger buildings, its stone walls worn but still strong. She paused at the entrance, her hand resting on the cool surface of the stone. "Now we honor what was lost," she said. "We rebuild. We remember." Daniel followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to expect, but something about this place felt sacred, as though it held memories of a time long gone, waiting to be awakened. As they moved deeper into the valley, they found more signs of the past, carved stones, intricate patterns etched into the earth, and remnants of tools and artifacts scattered throughout. Each piece they uncovered told a story of a people who had once lived here in harmony with the land. But there was also a sense of loss, a quiet sadness that seemed to echo through the valley. Nayeli moved with purpose, her eyes scanning each piece of history as if she were connecting the dots of a puzzle she had been piecing together for years. "We must find the center," she said, her voice steady and determined. "It's there that we will begin again." Daniel didn't question her. He had come to trust her instincts, even if he didn't fully understand them. They continued their search, moving through the valley with a sense of urgency, though the land around them seemed to slow down the passage of time. It was as if the valley itself was holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. Eventually, they came to a small hill in the center of the valley, where a large stone structure stood, half hidden by the overgrown grasses. The structure was unlike any they had seen before, tall and circular, with an entrance that seemed to lead into the heart of the earth itself. Nayeli stopped in front of it, her eyes wide with realization. "This is it," she whispered. "The heart of our people." Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine as he looked at the structure. It felt ancient, powerful, as if it had been waiting for them all this time. He could sense that this was the moment Nayeli had been waiting for, the moment that would determine the fate of her people. Together, they walked toward the entrance, their footsteps silent on the soft earth. As they stepped inside, the air grew cooler, and the shadows seemed to deepen, though the sunlight still poured into the valley outside. The walls of the stone structure were covered in ancient symbols, intricate designs that Daniel could not begin to understand, but they felt significant, as if they held the key to everything. Nayeli knelt down in front of the largest symbol, tracing it with her fingers as if she were unlocking a door. "This is where we begin," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "This is where our future starts." Daniel stood beside her, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They had found the place, but what would they do now? How would they rebuild, and what did the symbols mean? But as he looked down at the stone, he knew that this was only the beginning. The future of Nayeli's people, and his own, was now tied to this land, to these ancient stones. Together they would uncover the secrets of the past and build something new from the ashes of what had been lost. As Daniel and Nayeli stood inside the stone structure, the silence around them seemed to press in, thick and heavy. The air was cool, and the faint scent of earth and stone filled the space. Nayeli's hand traced the symbols on the walls, her fingers moving with a familiarity that Daniel couldn't understand. It was as if she had seen these markings before, as if they were etched into her very soul. He watched her, trying to piece together the puzzle she had been working on for so long. "What does it mean?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the fragile stillness of the moment. Nayeli didn't answer right away. She continued to trace the symbols, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a few moments she stopped and turned to face him. "These are the markings of our ancestors," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "Each symbol tells a story, a piece of our history. And this place," she gestured around them, "is where it all began. This is the heart of our people." Daniel nodded, but he still didn't fully understand. "But what does it mean for us now?" he asked, his gaze flickering to the walls again, trying to make sense of the ancient carvings. Nayeli paused, her expression softening. "It means we are ready," she said quietly. "Ready to rebuild, to honor the past and step into the future. This place is not just a symbol of what was lost. It is a place of renewal." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Daniel felt a flicker of understanding. They had not just found a physical place, but a beginning, a foundation on which to rebuild everything that had been taken from her people. "We need to bring the others here," Nayeli continued, her voice steady. "We need to show them this place, to remind them who they are and what they have fought for. Only then can we truly begin again." Daniel felt a surge of determination rise within him. He had come into this journey as an outsider, a man who had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it meant to belong. But now, standing in this sacred place with Nayeli, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was his too. Together they would bring her people back to this land, to this place where their ancestors had once lived in harmony with the earth. "How do we begin?" Daniel asked, his voice low but filled with resolve. Nayeli smiled, her eyes shining with the same determination he felt building inside him. "We start by honoring the past," she said. "We gather the people, and we show them what we have found. We build a new future, one that is rooted in the strength of our ancestors." Daniel nodded, the weight of the task ahead of him settling on his shoulders. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and doubts along the way. But standing there, in the heart of this sacred place, he knew that this was where they had to start. The fire of hope that had been rekindled within him burned brighter than ever before. The journey had been long, and there was still much work to be done. But with Nayeli by his side, and the knowledge that they were fighting for something much greater than themselves, Daniel felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would rebuild what had been lost and honor the legacy of those who had come before them. Days passed, and Daniel and Nayeli worked tirelessly, preparing the land for the arrival of her people. Together, they cleared the overgrowth, gathered the scattered stones, and began to rebuild the structures that had once been the heart of the valley. The task was daunting, but with each stone they placed, each piece of the past they restored, they felt a growing sense of purpose. The valley, once a forgotten place, was now coming to life again. As the work progressed, Daniel began to understand what Nayeli had meant when she spoke of honoring the past. It wasn't just about rebuilding what was lost, it was about connecting with something deeper, something that had been buried for generations. With every action, they were not just laying the foundations for homes, they were laying the foundations for the future of Nayeli's people. It wasn't long before others began to arrive. First came the small group of families who had been scattered across the land, each of them carrying their own stories of loss and survival. They had heard the call, and now they were returning to the place that had once been theirs. The reunion was a quiet one, filled with hesitant greetings and cautious steps. But as the days went by, the bonds between them began to strengthen. They were no longer just survivors, they were a community once more. Each evening, as the sun set over the valley, Daniel and Nayeli would sit by the fire, watching as the stars began to appear in the sky. It was during these moments that Nayeli would speak of the future, of what lay ahead for her people. "We have come so far," she would say, her voice filled with hope. "But this is only the beginning. The land is ours again, and we will make it thrive." Daniel would listen, his heart swelling with pride. He had never imagined that his journey would lead him here, to this place of renewal. He had started out as a man searching for something, but now he understood. He wasn't just a bystander in this story, he was part of it. He was part of something bigger than himself. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Nayeli turned to him with a serious expression on her face. "There is still much work to be done," she said. "But I am not alone in this anymore. We have each other, and together, we will rebuild what was lost." Daniel nodded, his heart full of gratitude for the path that had brought him here. He had found something he hadn't known he was searching for: purpose, belonging, and a place in the world. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the valley began to flourish once more. The land, once barren and forgotten, was now alive with the sounds of children playing, the scent of fresh bread baking, and the steady hum of life returning to its rightful place. The work was hard, and there were still challenges ahead, but Daniel knew they would face them together. The community that had once been scattered across the land was now whole again, and they were stronger for it. They had come together not just to survive, but to thrive. And as Daniel looked around at the faces of the people who had gathered here, he knew that their journey was far from over. They had found their way home, and now they would create a future that honored the past and embraced the promise of tomorrow. As the seasons changed, so did the lives of the people in the valley. What had once been a place of sorrow and loss had transformed into a thriving community, alive with the sounds of laughter, the clinking of tools, and the steady rhythm of work. The rebuilding process was far from easy, but every brick laid, every seed planted, was a testament to the resilience of Nayeli's people and the bond they shared with the land. Daniel had become an integral part of this new life. He wasn't just a man who had stumbled into a story he hadn't understood at first, he was now a cornerstone of the community. The land had welcomed him, and he had welcomed it in return. He had found purpose in the sweat of his brow and the simple acts of rebuilding. Days were spent helping the families rebuild their homes, tending to the fields, and working alongside the people who had once been strangers. The evenings were filled with stories, with songs around the fire, with dreams of the future. Nayeli, too, had found her place. The leadership she had always carried within her had flourished in the valley. She was a guiding force, a steady hand that held the community together as they forged a future from the ashes of the past. But even in the midst of the progress they had made, there was still a lingering sense of the weight of their history. Nayeli often walked alone, finding solace in the quiet moments where the land seemed to speak to her, reminding her of the journey they had all made. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the valley, Daniel joined her by the river bank. They sat together, watching the water flow gently past, the silence between them comfortable. Do you ever wonder if this is enough? Nayeli asked, her voice quiet, but filled with the weight of her thoughts. Daniel turned to her, his eyes thoughtful. I think we've come further than we could have ever imagined, he said. This place is more than just a home. It's a symbol of everything we fought for. Nayeli nodded, her gaze turning toward the valley, where the soft outlines of the homes could be seen in the distance. It's not just a home, though, she said. It's a future. A promise that we will never forget who we are or where we come from. They sat in silence for a long while, both lost in their thoughts, the sound of the river flowing a constant reminder of the passage of time. The days had turned into months, and though the work was far from over, there was a sense of peace in the valley now, a peace that had been earned through hard work, sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that the past did not define them, but instead, it had shaped them into who they were. As the stars began to twinkle above them, Daniel looked over at Nayeli, seeing not just the leader she had become, but the woman who had shown him what it meant to fight for something greater than oneself. We've made it this far, Daniel said, his voice filled with conviction. And we will keep going. Nayeli smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars above. Together, she said softly. The night was still, the promise of the future resting on their shoulders, but they knew one thing for certain: they had found a place where they belonged, and together, they would build something that would stand for generations to come.